The amount of times I've seen landing pages, home pages where, I work with clients, I'm like, I don't understand what you do, and I'm working with you. So it's almost impossible for someone else to land on this page and understand what they're getting.
Welcome back to Content in the Kitchen, where we gather around the kitchen and chat about content marketing. Today, we're stirring the pot with Erika, a master chef in the content marketing and SEO world. With over a decade of experience, Erika has crafted and executed content strategies for a diverse range of industries, from SaaS and fintech to travel and retail, generating millions in revenue and significantly increasing traffic using content. Her role at SEMrush saw her spearheading efforts to boost the company's organic and brand visibility worldwide, literally across the world. Erika's expertise isn't just confined to one sector, though. She's worked with leading names like Paddle, Capterra, and even Virgin Holidays. Beyond her professional achievements, Erika is a passionate public speaker, marketing tutor, awards judge, and so much more. Today, she's going to be sharing her knowledge and insights on how you can really get your content and brand seen internationally. So grab your favorite cup and let's dive into the conversation with Erika. Okay, so Erika, when you're not at your desk and you find yourself in the kitchen, I need to know, what is your go-to dish to cook?
Okay. I knew this was going to come. It would be a much easier question for me. Like, what is your go-to dish to eat? But I'm a terrible cook. I'm a notoriously bad cook in the sense that I don't really cook. So I've thought about it because you gave me an idea that you would ask me about cooking.
Yes.
So recently I've started trying some recipes from my mom. So Greek recipes. I have a 3-year-old. The whole guilt part has kicked in. Like, other moms do all of this, the healthy snacks, everything. And I was like, here's a ready-made cake for you. You can take it at school. So I'm terrible. I'm sorry. This is not a good start to this podcast. So I will go with, because I've already done it 3 times successfully with mini cheese pies that we cook in Greece and we bake for like pretty much everyone. It's always my favorite as a kid, and even now as an adult, I beg my mom to make them every time I go back. So I have successfully implemented that 3 times in the kitchen.
I would definitely call that a win. And if you can cook the same thing 3 times and it comes out good every single time, that's officially your go-to now.
It's my signature dish. It's like after the 5th time is a signature dish. So you add like an ingredient and you pretend that you made it your own. So that's my plan for the 5th time.
Yep. I think you should definitely run with it. And that is your official go-to dish. Diving into your journey, switching gears from your go-to dish to how the heck you even got into this industry. Your experience is amazing and so in-depth. I would love to learn how you found SEO and content and what sparked that passion for you.
Okay. I'm going to try to make it the short version so no one falls asleep, hopefully. But the idea was, it was a mixture of 2 things, right? I grew up and I was working in Greece. I'm Greek, and I was working as a journalist. I studied law. I hated it from the first day I was studying. So I was like, I want to write. So I somehow got into journalism and I loved it. But come 2012, and financial crisis hits hard, and the press also takes a really big hit. So at that point, I was like looking at how the press was doing globally, and I could see it was shifting. I could see that whole conversation around like online marketing, social media was becoming a thing. And I was feeling that the future is not necessarily in press in that sense. Mm-hmm. It was online. Plus, the future was probably, to me at the point, seemed like it wasn't in Greece, and I needed to leave and try something somewhere that would allow me to do it. Because also as a market, it was quite small and a bit left behind on that front. So my now husband, then partner, decided to leave Greece and come to the UK. Mm-hmm. And it was a conscious decision on my side that I would not pursue any kind of roles in journalism or magazines, press. I was going to start from scratch, everything, and try to get into online marketing. At the time, I didn't know about SEO. I was like online marketing, social media, publishing online, all that kind of stuff. So thankfully, after 3-4 months of landing in the UK, someone was crazy enough at an agency to give me a role. It was There's probably hundreds of applications that I wasn't getting an answer or hearing back anything. But after 3-4 months, I started at this agency. It was a small agency in a small part of England, but I took it. I was super excited. And because it was a small agency and the role was like entry level, I was pretty much given everything to do. So something that for someone else would be a bad thing, or I'm going to do it only for a bit, for me was super exciting because it allowed me to work on different clients, different channels, overwork myself, but for a good reason. Like I was reading a lot. And that's when I started seeing through practice and reading that actually I feel my skills would be very relevant to content marketing, which was starting to be the talk of the town. How many times did we see in 2012, like content is king, and how many times since? So I started to move myself more in that direction. So my next roles at agencies were on the content marketing side or on the SEO side. And for me, SEO, because it's not one thing. And at the time, it was very distinct. It was like link building, content, and then technical SEO. And no one, of course, trusted me to do technical SEO. But everyone wanted me to do content marketing because I was doing that a lot and my skills matched. Again, I started going into agencies, into new roles and not hopping from one to the other, but sometimes the opportunities came to me. And they were like, we have this role, we think it would be a good match. And that's how I started getting more into it. But I was very interested in working very closely with like the SEO strategist, the tech SEO person, the UX designer. Digital PR was a thing in some cases back then. It was not just link building. So I was fortunate enough to work at agencies that had digital PR already and were understanding that connection. So that's how I started getting into it. It's not magic in a way. I just was fortunate enough to come into it when it was starting to rise. Google was becoming smarter, more sophisticated. I think if I had done that 10 years before, I would have been disappointed. I wouldn't have liked it because like content marketing or link building were much more less sophisticated. And that's how I got into it. I really loved it. I loved the combination of how creative and also how methodical you have to be, how analytical. So it was a perfect mix for me, and I took it from there.
I feel like there's definitely a pattern here. I came from a journalism background. You came from journalism background. I've talked to so many specifically content marketers who started with print back in the day. And then when print started, there was that big fear of print's dying. What are we going to do? And what's going to happen in journalism in general? The environment was changing and everything was going online. And I remember Tumblr coming out and being like, okay, that we could still tell stories this way. And then Facebook was huge. And then blogging, you had to have 1 million blog posts being published all the time for a site to be found, like back in the day of quantity versus quality. And so that journalism really helps equip a lot of content marketers to have this foundation of our job is to tell a story, whether we're telling the brand story or whether we're telling a customer story. That is our number one role. And then it's to make sure that those stories get found and read and engaged with, and whether we're using SEO or advertising, whatever that looks like. Have you found yourself using any of your old journalism techniques as you've gone from content marketing to SEO and as you said, the methodical approach?
Yeah. So I used to say this a lot when I was talking with people or meeting people, let's say at an event. But for many years, what I was saying is that journalism has helped me more in my progress within SEO and digital marketing than anything else I've learned on the job. And the reason I was saying that, I think, Ashley, you're nodding, so you get it, is that journalism has some foundations that are still true when you're in, let's say, content marketing, whether you're doing it like for organic visibility or for brand visibility, right? Content is the means to not just to attract audiences, but to engage and build that affinity between them and you. And press is actually publishers are a great example of that. They have these huge audiences when they build them, then go to them, not because they search on Google and they find someone ranking, but because they trust that source for information, right? At least good publishers or established publishers and publishers who do a good job in whatever industry they're in. And in that sense, content for the website is a means to that end, is not a means to how many likes I'm going to get on Facebook with this post, or how many people will come to my page even with a successful post. What position will I rank in? Sure, you can look at that, or you can spend your time and set up goals for those things. But ultimately, and this is where we're all led gradually, especially now with the developments in AI and Google everywhere, it's like essentially what you're doing is building that trust, is building that in the minds of your audiences. And this is typical marketing, but I would argue also journalism. It also has to do with how well you build your story, how well you engage. For publishers as well, for many years, arguably now, a big part of the revenue was ads, was media, advertising, right? And that could only happen if they had big audiences, a loyal audiences, all of this. So it is of a similar situation, but for someone who's a journalist or writer, what they have on hand to contribute towards that end goal is creating content that resonates with that audience, right? And that is true. I don't think we need to talk about the techniques or the ways you can tell a story and be successful or tell it well. But I found myself, a funny thing is I remember once during my first months as a journalist, I had turned in a piece of content and I was feeling so proud. I was like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever written. I'm dying to see people cry when they read it. And
I remember those feelings.
I was into her office. She had a printout and she was like, that's terrible. She just throws it out of her desk and she's like, how can you read it? You just printed it off. Like, you cannot have read it. She was like, I read the intro. I don't like it. I don't like the intro, so I don't care about the rest. For me, this was one of the biggest lessons that I still like when managing or editorial teams or working with writers. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in that abusive tone, but in a sense of like, people's time is limited and attention span as well. It is. You don't really have much beyond those first few lines to make someone tell if they should go on or spend their time on something else. And that is like a very big principle that has followed me, especially since that incident. I remember spending like hours turning back to the intro had changed 1,000 times. It was terrible, but it was also like a big lesson that has helped me a lot when progressing into online.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, how like something so scarring could really be held through your entire career. And now with what you do with your work and the different industries that you've worked in, that's still playing such a pivotal move in the decisions that you make. When we're talking about creating a piece of content, we're still fighting and battling to keep people's attention so that they don't bounce off and go back to Google and click on a competitor site or just literally any other site to get that information. We want to keep them. Have you found anything especially with the different industries that you've worked in, have you found anything that actually does draw a hook in a non-spammy, non-clickbaity way, but what does keep people on the page and invested in the content these days?
I think it depends. It depends on a few things, but I don't want to give a vague answer, so I'm going to try to make it as useful as possible. I think we first have to look at the type of audience and type of page, right? Mm-hmm. So how you keep someone who's top of the funnel researching how to do something. I think at that point, maybe they don't even care about the brand. They care about the kind of information and the format they find it in, right? So as brands, we think, I want to rank because this is a big term. Everyone searches for it. And it's right, but it's not on the basis of if you have the best piece, then that person is going to buy from you. Not necessarily. So at that point, I think we have to think more about what is it that they actually are looking to solve? What is their pain point? What is their need? What is the most painless way to give it to them so they don't have to try hard to do it? Because it is what you said before, is like we're all fighting not just for a space in Google, but then now we're fighting against really bad content everywhere. Also like where people will search. Why only give it to them on a page? Are we repurposing that? If someone searches for that thing on YouTube or on TikTok, will they find us? Or is it just, we're still just looking at one place to do this and then just resharing it on social and thinking, okay, we've created it, then we've promoted it, that's it. It's not that. It's like content the good thing with content is that it costs, but you have so many options of repurposing it that you can keep like repurposing and building something even almost entirely new by something you've already done. So I would say there, it's about giving them what they need. And for me, one thing that works is always think about, I don't like to say journeys because journeys makes us sound like we know exactly the process someone will follow and that we're predicting that someone who searches for this, then they need that and then they will buy. No, but trying to be in that position of what are the needs, what are the pains they're trying to solve, what are the relevant pieces of information or pains may they also want to solve, and then even simple things like include the right links in that content, make them or help them take that next step. They might not even know that they need more information. Like how many times have you done a search about something that you thought that's what I need to search for, and then you read about it and then you found more cool information and websites to search for more. So it is predicting that kind of need, getting into their shoes to understand how that journey might look like, or multiple journeys can look like. Now, if we're talking about more, let's say, product pages or feature page, things like that, I feel that there is where we really need to tone up the trust element a lot, right? So one thing is to be very clear about what it is that we're offering. The amount of times I've seen landing pages, home pages where, you know, I work with clients, I'm like, I don't understand what you do and I'm working with you. So it's almost impossible for someone else to land on this page and understand what they're getting. So this sounds like a basic thing, but the amount of times people don't get it right, or there's so much into it that they are assuming too much knowledge on the other side and they're missing out. But then I feel it's also, of course, user experience, all of it, but I want to highlight the element of trust. Like people need to be able to trust you. If they're going to invest their money, not just their time now, but their money, depending on the industry, it may mean going into a long-term relation, a subscription or something, or a big amount of money. And they may have to convince many people on their side to do it. The element of trust is super important, I feel, especially on those pages. There's a lot of other things, but I feel those two are good to emphasize because this is what can differentiate brands between them. It's not so much, sometimes the products may be similar, right? So how we talk about them and how we earn people's trust is super important.
Yeah, just last night I was looking, I'm trying to print a bunch of t-shirts for ContentYum for an upcoming conference. And first thing I do, go to Google and look for t-shirt printers. I go through every single one and I'm trying to figure out what makes them all different. They all say that they use the same material, that the printing time is going to be the same, the printing type and style is going to be the same. The reviews are all fairly equal. So as a consumer, what is it that's supposed to make this different? And one talked about how they come from eco-conscious materials and it's the same price as most of the others. That is important to me. So now I'm trusting this brand that what they say they actually do in print. And so I decided to go with that brand. And this really comes back to that journalistic approach of knowing your audience, knowing what information that they need out of this piece, out of this story. You talked a lot about user intent, and that's really coming down to, is this commercial? Is this informational? Is this going to be transactional? What does the person want out of this? And then, like you said, sometimes they don't know past that. And so you need to have your shining value props out there, up front and center in every piece of content, and finding ways to do that. Have you found a certain way to scream with some of the brands that you've worked with, hey, this is what makes us unique, in an informational or commercial piece of content that maybe isn't intended for that?
Yeah, sure. There are probably different ways depending on industries, the type of brand you are as well. You've seen it as well. Some brands do it very differently than others. So you have brands that don't really scream about the product, but they have this super funny or super engaging personality on social, right? So people then start to dig into it without putting their product in their face. And others, again, maybe depending on the industry or the type of people that work there and the type of brand they're trying to build, is they're relying a lot more on data and sharing thought leadership content. So for me, it's it's different things. I would say it's not one thing that I've found to work every time. Maybe if I think about it too much, I might find it. But at the end of the day, there are the trust or getting people to trust you, right? Essentially, this time building that affinity, trusting you and wanting to be using your products or working with you is the things that others say about you. And then there's the things that you say about you. And I think those two, if they're not equally important, they definitely look like they're becoming almost balanced in terms of importance. Because nowadays, people do look for reviews. They do look for information, what is said about you elsewhere. And that is part of the definition of a brand anyway. It's not what you say about yourself, it's what others say about you. I feel that when I started working in this industry, what others say about you was not such a front of mind thought for people, but I feel that nowadays this is shifting. It's the right thing. And then in terms of what you can say about you and still have an impact, I think that also comes from understanding your audience, because your audience may not want you to just tell them how amazing you are. They may just want to be given really thorough or good advice on their needs, and that makes them trust your brand. Of course, if we're talking about formats, right, case studies is a basic element of building that trust. Like people who work for companies, buy products or on their own, they rely on what others have done with this and have been successful. We want, by nature, we want to reach that stage of success, and by seeing how others have done it, strengthens our position. But other than that, there's a million things, honestly. It's about how well you want to dive into what your audience needs, how they think, what's the perception about your brand. This is one element that I feel is very underutilized right now. Is like qualitative research may be seen as costly, but at some point, I feel if someone is serious and intentional about their brand and their company, they should be getting that kind of information. And sometimes you're just sitting on a ton of it, like your sales teams, your account management teams, they have tons of data. Like many companies use software and AI tools that you can just get all this data and analyze it to understand what is it that makes people not like you, frustrate them, what they're looking to solve. So I would say before even doing the quantitative analysis, like what kind of information are you sitting on that you're not using?
That's a really good point. I love that you brought up AI, because I feel like as brands and content marketers, we were finally getting to a stage to where we're able to really build trust with our audiences across the board. We were doing persona modifications and really building out all the different customer profiles and understanding, building content around that, which is really traditional marketing 101, really journalism 101. Like these are all very basic things. And now we're starting to slip back into kind of those real spammy link building days with all this AI content. And now I'm finding myself as a user going through different search results and questioning the content, not because I think it's written by AI, but because of the company's approach using AI to create the content versus using internal resources, like what they're showing. Like you said, like case studies, that's pretty black and white. You can trust that the brand that they partnered with is saying, yes, I actually did work with this company, or the customer, yes, I did work with this company. This is the results from it. But now with AI, we're getting into this really weird fine line of, I don't know if I can trust everything that your brand is putting out. How are you dealing with that from a content marketing perspective, like working with global brands? This has got to be something that's popping up is, where's the ethical use of AI? How can we use it to help us and to help our content campaigns? But also, where do we draw the line for our consumers?
Yeah, for sure. At this stage, these are partly philosophical questions, because I'm not even clear on the guidelines and the criteria some of these companies have utilized to train their AI models, right? So we're all in this, I feel, this first phase post-earthquake where no one's really sure if the building's going to collapse or not. But that's how I feel sometimes. The things I can truthfully say is that I am using AI and I've seen good uses of it, and I'm reading about use cases that I find interesting and that I might try them out. I don't feel the game nowadays is positioned as, are you pro or against? And then if you're using it, use it as much as you can. If you're not, you're falling behind or something. I think the real question is closer to what you're putting is, okay, how do we know, or how do we decide that this is what we do with it? This is not what we do with it. Also experience, or my experience shows that sometimes, even if you draw a line somewhere, if the rest of the world or your competitors do something else, you will have again to redefine where you draw the line, right? So I feel that's why like philosophical, but for now I can say that for me, the difference between AI and like human content, I don't even work myself up so much about like how good is it. There's been mediocre and bad content created by humans online for a long time.
No, not us.
No, but like you're saying about now questioning on Google. For me, it had been a long time where either I would just disregard the top results because I'm like, these are probably, and I could see the pages, I would see the usual suspects. I'm like, they have better SEO than others. Or I would click on them and like the difference between the first, the second, and the third would be like minimal. So my value when I wanted to really dig into something was not there because I was having to click on many results to get a different aspect, a different angle, or something different. So I think the real question is, what makes this content human? Because humans trust humans. Right now, we're told not to trust AI, even AI alone, like ChatGPT, everything says, don't trust us. It may hallucinate anyway. And then what comes into it is, I know lately I've seen many discussions around, is it a ranking factor or not? But in reality, EAT is a good framework for anyone creating content online, building experiences online through content to assess the quality of that content. And I would say that there are some really good guidance and advice there as to how you would reverse it to give advice to your team or your writers, or if you're writing yourself, who is talking? How do we know that? It's very different if someone has written 5 papers on a topic and, I don't know, on a medical thing versus someone who's just employed by a brand to write something. Because then it could be just a blogger who just got this job and then next year he may be employed by a different company. That a kind of personal element of who is talking, how have they done it, what is their experience, where else do I find them? Do they speak in conferences? Do they post content? Do they have firsthand experience? Have they published any case studies of their own? Or have they led like any research themselves? And I understand that not everyone can do that, but I'm not just talking about that one person. It's like the people that the brand or the company chooses to put at the front, how many other testimonials they can include if they're reaching out to people who have authority in that industry to incorporate their take or their angle into their content. These are all things that matter. It is something that AI cannot do, for one. And it's also like basic human psychology. Like people tend to trust people who know what they're talking about or have been successful by doing something. So the closer we get to that model, I think the better it is. Now, it doesn't mean that 80% of that content cannot have been created by AI. But then if a super editor and super writer just make it like tone of voice, how they talk, incorporate a brand tone if it's distinctive. And it does make sense to have a distinctive brand tone as well. And then bring that thought leadership element, first party data. These are all things that AI cannot do. And they can really tip the scale versus everyone else who will be putting out similar pieces of content as you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because we're not, I feel like there really is this tug and pull of if you use AI, that's a bad thing. Or if you don't use AI, that's a bad thing. We are really learning how to use AI properly and the depths of how we can use it. I mean, I love to talk about it as a coworker, and it's great for strategizing and making sure that in my content puzzle, I have all of the correct pieces. But when it comes to publishing that puzzle and really executing on, that's myself and my team who's doing that. And that's because we know our personas, we know what to say, we have the data, and getting testimonials like that is something that AI could make up 1,000 of them. But when you have that real human image, or when you have that logo from a big corporate company, there's that trust. And it really is that baseline that circles all the way back from trying to get trust from your readers. I think a lot of brands, whether they're new and just starting out or they're huge and they're trying to position themselves with new products, this is a step that they fumble on, is that you need to establish trust. Even if you're already an established brand, like you need to establish that, hey, we are qualified to produce a product like this, or for a brand new brand, I am qualified to talk about food recipes under this specific niche because I've been gluten-free for X amount of years. So I'm experiencing this just like you are. Yeah. Have you found with any of the brands that you've worked with take that step really well and do a good job of establishing trust from the beginning stage and then executing content from it? Or is it usually publishing a lot of content, seeing, okay, we're not getting the KPIs that we want, let's backpedal a little bit?
I would say I've seen both. So I wouldn't be honest if I said, yeah, I've seen just this, mostly this or the other. But in many cases, it's also understandable. And especially like smaller companies who have not, there's that distinction between a company or a website and a brand. Like a brand is much more intentional. On the other hand, I always argue that even if it's not intentional, if you've been around for a while, others will talk about you. So by definition, you have some kind of brand, you just don't do anything about it. So I've seen both. And again, like for me, the biggest disappointments were when, you know, I could tell, arguably I could be wrong, but I could tell that the time that is given into things plus the resources just needed a bit more. It's like sometimes that impatience or the goals to achieve are, I don't want to say unrealistic, they're maybe too ambitious, but then how someone reacts to not hitting that goal now. They can give it more time, they can readjust the goal, or they can take it all back and roll back. I think roll back usually involves that element of having wasted something like budget, time. And if it was like a well thought out thing initially, I think before rolling back, it is worth establishing whether something should be readjusted or reconsidered or given more time. That can also be a case. I have seen brands doing a good job. I don't know if a brand can do a great job or spotless job across the whole funnel and journey, but I have worked with brands who are doing a great job in terms of understanding their audience's pain points, having content in different formats. I find that really important. And especially just going back a bit with AI. Like if you think about it, AI can pretty much now create video. Soon it will be much better, right? Mm-hmm. So arguably that may also not last long. But for as long as it lasts, like us talking on video now is a very human thing to do that could not necessarily be replicated in any way by AI right now. Us using a tool to do this in 1,000 languages is a huge opportunity as well. So that's what I mean by finding the intersection of what is really, what can make a difference. Plus, how can this be supported or amplified by AI? I think this is what makes it fascinating. So for sure, there are things there. But yeah, I've worked with brands who have done a good job and also understand even differences, not even in one audience, but like different locations, different countries, which is another sort of challenge altogether. And what they do well is that they take into account that they have this element of long-term vision. So they may be impatient or have aggressive goals, but their success has not been overnight and they know it. And that sort of gives them the maturity to be very strategic about the stages that they follow or what they do as a quick win versus what they invest more time into building in a different way.
Especially for new companies, you just want to jump on everything right away. Yeah. Like, okay, I need to do this. I need to be on all these channels. I need to produce this kind of content and establish trust and authority and helpful content update. Oh, Google, another update. There's so many things to do and so many hats. When you get to that maturity level, you're like, all right, this is actually worth putting time and resources on. This can wait. And let's get the KPIs from this, then dictate this. And then it becomes this like more clear pathway and strategy. And like you said, that's a great point to then bring in AI and be like, all right, this is what we know we need to execute on. help create this podcast in X amount of languages and execute on that, because that's not something that I can do on my own, or could potentially, but it would be incredibly lengthy and very unrealistic. Yeah, there's a lot of good that can come with AI, but it really does come down to making sure that you are still establishing trust with your consumers, with the followers, with the visitors on your site. As we're coming to the end of our chat, I would love to know, you've shared quite a lot of great secrets already, but I'd love to know what your true secret sauce is. What has really been moving the needle for you in your content strategy lately?
So I'm trying to think of the last couple of years, but obviously a year in search is more like a century in real life. I would say that creating tools and like free things to give out to people, like this may be more applicable, for example, because I was in Summers, so it's B2B SaaS, but it is a common place for many SaaS companies. Seeing what kind of value you can give to users for free is definitely exploring, right? Another thing is that firsthand data you can share, like how many insights, how much visibility into using your own data you can give through creating like industry reports or a piece of content that tackles or tries to answer real questions people in your sphere have. So original first-party data is working great, I would say. And then I would also argue that is a point I'm trying to make as well many times when I speak with people, but I don't think there's a one answer fits all. And I would challenge everyone to think beyond that they see everywhere. So for example, for many years, we all see you need to find, low keyword difficulty keywords and tackle them. But now, especially with AI, I would challenge everyone to think, okay, if I haven't done it, I would try it still. I would test to see how it does. But especially if I'm a new website or a new brand, maybe that will not pay off quickly or at all. So I would dare everyone to test something new every now and again and as often as they can. So something that doesn't work for me may work amazingly well for someone else. Building a community, great. Thought leadership, encouraging your own staff, especially if you're a small company, your connections, thought leadership, how you get out there may be down to simple or seemingly simple things like that. But yeah, I would put that now as something that works.
Yeah, that's a great point. I set aside one day out of every quarter to brainstorm new ideas of things to test. And sometimes that day comes up on my calendar and can't do it, not happening. But I'm working really hard this year to prioritize and make that time, because it is so important to test new things. We get into our rhythms and it's human. We've all got a million things to do. So we get into our rhythms and our patterns. And so if you can find a way to make sure you set aside time to test something new, like you mentioned, whether that's building community, trying out a free tool, whatever that looks like, it could really make or break where your business goes within the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it can vary so much. So I've seen, I work with clients in industries where networking, people networking has a huge impact or a much better impact than publishing content on their site. So I think you need to understand your industry, your audience, what moves the needle for you. And then, of course, look out for case studies from others or what is best practice. But best practice may not move the needle. So be very critical. That's all I recommend to begin with.
I love it. And I think we should definitely end on that note. Erika, thank you so much for everything you shared today.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. It was a pleasure.